new immigration policies announced on 15th of April 2020. Good news for more skilled workers and students. Joining me is Kashif Majid, Director of Aston Brooks Solicitors, who has been practicing law for last 21 years. So Kashif, let's get straight to the point. With this new announcement, will it make things easier for the immigrants in UK?
Thank you, Gunjan, for having me on your show. Yes, the initial answer is definitely yes, it will make things a lot easier for migrants in the UK. And the main purpose of that is because the government have recognized that, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we need to get key workers and migrant workers back into work, especially frontline services. And I think this is what's the driving force behind this initiative by the government to then announce this on the 15th of April, their new rules subject to migrants who have got pending applications, who are waiting for decisions on their applications, or on the basis of visa centres being closed in country as well as out of country. So if any migrants who are watching this are concerned about whether their visas will be approved, whether the timelines of getting their visas approved is going to be an issue now, whether they're going to have appointments available, because majority of migrants would have either received an email if they made an application from the visa centres to say they are closed due to COVID-19, and their appointments will be rearranged. But then there are some people whose visas are due to expire and they have no clear guidance as to what the next steps would be, especially in light of the fact that the Home Office have closed their centres. For that reason, these new announcements made are certainly going to give a little bit more clarity on where migrants' rights are at the moment.
I believe there are announcements for both. So Kashif, can you please explain what are the announcements made for Tier 2?
There are two categories that the government have mentioned in these guidance. The first is Tier 2. Tier 2 are skilled migrant workforce. So if many of your viewers may need more comment to the term work permit as opposed to Tier 2. But yeah, it's the old work permit scheme which was replaced in 2008 in November with a new point-based system. And Tier 2 is skilled workers. So skilled workers fall into a category now where if the skill level is at level 6 and those job roles are being granted to migrants, for example, in healthcare specifically, if you're looking at doctors, you're looking at nurses, those candidates would have been granted a Tier 2. Obviously, there are other sectors outside the healthcare sector which also fall into Tier 2, which whether that be in IT, whether that be in communications, whether that be in television, any other sector which requires sponsored staff under Tier 2, they will be skilled workers. Now, in the current rules, there was no such provision where a Tier 2 migrant could work for their employer while their application was still pending. However, as of the 15th of April, the new guidance published by the Home Office have stipulated that anyone under Tier 2 who has a certificate of a sponsorship assigned to them. Now, the certificate of sponsorship is the document which you require from your employer to confirm that you will be working for them and a specific job role and a specific salary. Now, that certificate, as long as that's been assigned and you made the application before your visa expired, and you are now also going to be doing the same job role as stipulated on your certificate of sponsorship, then the rules are you can start work immediately. So that is a huge relief for frontline key workers in the NHS, doctors, nurses, and other key line workers, but also for other sectors which may be suffering as a result of the lockdown. And this way, we can have migrants, which I believe will be in the healthcare sector, who will be working now as doctors and nurses. But then you have non-healthcare workers, which will still be able to be employed because they'll be in the lockdown, but they'll be working from home. At least those people will be earning. And I think that's one of the major other issues is how this COVID-19 pandemic is going to affect the economy. But this way, I think the Home Office have recognized that there has to be some changes in their policy and in their guidance to facilitate a more smoother process into the economy coming back on its feet again. And this will allow them to do that.
Well, that's a good news for Tier 2 workers. What about Tier 4?
Tier 4 is the student route, so student visa holders. Now, the government have also recognized that there's a need for Tier 4 students to commence studies or continue their studies either during this lockdown period, whether they're working from home, but at least their syllabuses and their courses and their classes are able to take place remotely, and that's very important for Tier 4 students. Now, again, similar to Tier 2, you would be originally, you put an application in for an extension of your Tier 4 visa. You make sure you put the application before your visa expires, as I stipulated before. It's very important not to do it after the visa expired. And you have a certificate of acceptance of studies, which is the CAS letter, which comes from the university, to confirm your enrollment onto the particular course for that duration and at that specific university. Now, previously, you would have to wait for the Tier 4 visa to be granted and your biometric residence permit card to be issued before you're able to commence studies. However, the rules that were for Tier 2 now apply for Tier 4. You can now have your enrollment at that particular university and enroll onto the course and commence your studies, albeit during the COVID-19 pandemic that may be working from home or remote courses that the lecturers will implement online, but at least you're able to start and not miss the start term dates of any institution. So, I mean, both of these provisions are bringing significant changes to the immigration rules, which were not in place before. And I think it's a great move, something more positive coming from the Home Office, because as you can imagine with migrants, the Home Office have always been criticized with the way things have progressed as far as migration is concerned. Immigration is a hot topic always in any election and any campaign from any government body. And therefore, these steps, I believe, are very welcome by the sector, not just healthcare, but every other sector as well.
What if a person is a doctor, nurse, a pandemic worker, or a volunteer in NHS?
Well, if you're a doctor or a nurse or a pandemic worker within Keyline NHS services, I believe these rules have been brought specifically in play because of your job roles. And I think the important point is to understand, as you know, with government announcements recently over the last few weeks, there's been a massive call for NHS workers who have retired, who've gone to other private practices or consultation positions, to come back into the sector. And I think with any migrant that's a doctor or a nurse or a pandemic worker, then these rules will allow you to start work without the requirement of waiting weeks and weeks for the pandemic to overcome before your visa is granted. And I think that will help Keyline workers, and then obviously the fight against COVID-19 with the help of our main key workers such as doctors and nurses who are fighting day on day to help society to make sure that we are all protected.
In reality right now, in this pandemic crisis, we need each of the skilled workers to come and help fight COVID-19. I think by easing the policies and giving them the right to work straight away can make a big difference.
Absolutely, Gunjan. I think, like I said, this has been recognized by the government, albeit, it's come slightly later than I would have expected, because, we've known about the pandemic for a little while, and we would have expected announcement from the Home Office maybe earlier. But like I said, better late than never.
What happens if Tier 2 and Tier 4 visas subsequently rejected?
Well, if you're unfortunate in the circumstance of where your Tier 2 or Tier 4 visa has been rejected, what the Home Office have issued in this public guidance document is that you will have to unfortunately stop studying when that decision comes through, whether you're a Tier 4 student holder or you're a Tier 2 skilled worker. If your application is rejected as a Tier 2, the same applies. You will have to stop working for the sponsor or the employer that you've been employed by because your application has been rejected. However, there is a caveat to that refusal. You will be given a right of appeal through what we call an administrative review, where you can challenge that decision. So if someone believes that the decision was unlawful or unfair or has not been addressed properly, then there are avenues to appeal that decision through the appropriate process.
Kashif, looks like a positive move from the Home Office during this pandemic crisis.
I think, we're moving towards the right direction as far as migration is concerned. Everybody will maybe already aware, especially if you're a migrant, of the new immigration system coming into play in January 2021. There's a lot of moves forward, positive moves forward for migration in those proposals. However, there is also a lot of criticism in specific relating to unskilled labour and maybe low-skilled workers, which I think the government have a separate definition for. And I think in the sector, or in each individual sector, we have a different understanding or definition of low-skilled workers. We believe they're all key workers, they're all skilled workers. So the new point-based system, which will then apply from January, post-Brexit, people from the EU, as well as those from outside the EU, will be subject to the same rules, which if you want to work in the UK, you will have to be sponsored under Tier 2 of the point-based system. You will have to satisfy certain criteria. That criteria will be the job role that you've been offered, the salary, the English language requirement, and obviously maintenance of funds. And obviously, in order to facilitate that, your employer must hold a sponsor license.
Kashif, you raised a very important point. I think we should cover the new immigration policies post-Brexit 2021 in another video. But for now, let me ask you straight. You've handled many immigration cases for over the years. Are you happy with the new announcements?
I'm actually torn between the announcements. I welcome the announcements that were made on the 15th of April. I also welcome the announcements that were made earlier in the year in relation to, as soon as this pandemic came into play, the Home Office did make an announcement that anyone that has a visa or is in the UK as a visitor is unable to travel back to their home countries, or has a visa that is due to expire within the 3-month period up to the 31st of May 2020, they will automatically extend those visas for that period of time. Therefore, those people are not going to be in the UK illegally. They're not going to be overstaying, which is obviously key. And one other thing that I welcome is in these new announcements on the 15th of April, any doctors or nurses and key line staff working in the UK have automatically been extended their visas for 12 months. And that 12-month extension from the 31st of October 2020 will actually also mean huge savings on Home Office fees, which the Home Office very rarely does. So you now don't need to pay the immigration health surcharge, which is £400 a year, and you also don't need to pay any application fees. So that is one step I definitely welcome with the Home Office in relation to the recent changes. But yes, there have been some positive changes, and I think there needs to be certain improvements that need to take place as well. And only time will tell how they will pan out.
Thank you, Kashif, for sparing your valuable time and answering those questions.
It's been a pleasure.
My name is Gunjan Hazarika, a television producer and director. My job is to go and find the answers to your questions. All you have to do is like and share these videos. We're going to make a lot of videos similarly where it can go and help you. So this is your right, this is the platform. Let's connect.